It looks like everyone's here, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kira Dickey. I'm the Market Development Manager at Peerceptiv. With us on call, we have Hannah Lawrence. Hannah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Hannah Lawrence. I'm a licensing manager at Jisc. I'll talk a little bit more in a minute, but I've specialised in creating a product suite of assessment and feedback tools for our members.
Great, thank you, Hannah. We also have Owen Britton. Owen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm in charge of partnership development here at Peerceptiv. I worked pretty closely with Hannah to get Peerceptiv to be JISC approved and to set up licensing that applies to the UK and Ireland. Hannah also negotiated a nice little discount for everybody in the UK and Ireland as well. So if you are ultimately interested in Peerceptiv, you would be working with me on things like implementation.
And great, Dr. Simon, if you'd introduce yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Simon Bowes. I'm a lecturer in cognitive science at the University of Sussex in Brighton.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Hannah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, so nice to meet you all. It's a pleasure to be here today with Peerceptiv. So Peerceptiv is the first product that we approached when we started to build out a suite of assessment and feedback tools for our members. So following research, internal research by JISC, it's called the Principles of Good Assessment and Feedback, and it was published in 2024. That work by Sarah Knight and her team sparked our interest in the assessment and feedback space, and we realised that in licensing we didn't have enough products in that area to meet the needs of our members in that space. And so from member feedback, Sarah Knight's report of good principles of assessment and feedback, and also so many other business intelligence, member voice, market intelligence, we came to a set of different products that we knew could meet the needs of our members, and one of those was peer review. Hence why we reached out to Peerceptiv, as we heard some great things about it. We had a fantastic member feedback, also some great case studies, and therefore we put the license in place. And like Owen mentioned before, we have a really good deal through JISC. I can talk about a little bit more about that at the end. So yeah, that's how it started, and we're still building out these assessment and feedback suites feedback product suites at JISC at the moment. However, Peerceptiv is firmly on there. And a great product, and I'm really looking forward to hearing Simon's use case today. Okay.
Yeah, that brings us to Simon. Simon, if you'd like to tell us about, the work you've done with Peerceptiv, how you've used it in your course, some things you've noticed since you started using
Yeah,
it, that'd be great.
sure. So the module that we use it on is a first year module, and it's assessed by an essay at the end, which is 100% of the assessment. So it's a high stakes thing. And over many years, we realized that through feedback from students, that not everybody was that confident in their essay writing. Not everyone had had the same background in training to write essays. So we realized that we needed to implement something as student training in essay writing. And we thought that doing it as a peer review throughout the term was a good way of doing that, because it trains students to use the marking rubric to evaluate their peers' writing. So they get feedback on their writing, but more importantly, they get to understand how we grade the writing and what we consider to be a good essay. And they do that 3 times through the term in a formative way, so it doesn't contribute to their final assessment, and then they write their final essay at the end, which we grade. When we first used Peerceptiv, we did actually use it for part of the final grade as well, but students weren't that happy with being graded by their fellow students, even though we, showed them the studies that showed that it was that the marks were valid. Still, they just the feedback was that they want us to write their feedback and give their marks. So we just use it for the formative essays, and it's still we still get out of it what we want to get out of it in that sense. Uh, so we the three stages are they submit their essays, then they use the rubric to give feedback on three peers, and then they give feedback on the feedback that they get, so the students understand, whether their understanding of the rubric matches other students and how useful their feedback is. So as well as training them in essay writing and how we mark the essays, which should help them with their essays. It trains them in how to give feedback in a constructive manner as well, which is a good skill. It helps, I think, it gets them engaged with the writing task in a way that is more involving, more engaging than just giving them an essay and they go away and they write it on their own. Um, I think they feel some responsibility to their peers to give feedback. They're all in it together. So it creates a kind of good collaborative environment and feeling, I think. Um, and there's lots of transferable skills that they get from engaging in that kind of giving and receiving of feedback, apart from just learning about how to write, how to communicate effectively, and the critical thinking skills and the kind of reflective skills that they get, like understanding what aspects of their writing needs to be improved, or how they need to write in a way that communicates effectively to others. And importantly, I think like one of the things that worried us about the fact that some students were less prepared than others to write essays is that there was a clear difference between students from certain kinds of schools, i.e., independent fee-paying schools, who get very good training in essay writing, and students from other schools who have very little training in essay writing. And it leads to unequal outcomes, and we wanted to try and address that to level the playing field a bit. I mean, since we've been doing it, we have had um, good feedback in general. Not everybody likes um, giving and receiving feedback from their peers, but I think they understand that we're not able to give that amount of feedback to every student. We just don't have the time to do that. So they understand, I think, that it's a good way of getting feedback. And there are lots of students who, in one-to-one discussions, have said that they've really benefited from it. So in general, I think this approach of using peer feedback with the marking criteria that we will use in this kind of cyclical way is a very effective way of student training in things like essay writing skills. So in general, I think it's been a benefit to our students. So yeah, that's been good.
In terms of those inequities, did you see those kind of level out between students?
Um, I mean, I haven't got the data to back that up because I can't actually sort the data like that to like students from particular backgrounds. I have tried to get that data actually, and they won't let me have it.
Would
Um,
be interesting to
but
know.
I think anecdotally, from what I can see, yes, and I think it uh, it makes sense that it should at least address that to an extent, although it's difficult to get the evidence exactly. Yeah.
Great. Have you noticed, in terms of like reading those essays to give the final marks, have you noticed a significant change in the quality of the essays or?
Yes, I would say so. I think they're much more consistent than they were. at the lower end where we used to get some essays which were clearly, didn't really know how to write something like that. Even the ones that are poorly written now, you can see that there's some understanding of what makes an essay at least. And so in general, yeah, I think the consistency has definitely improved.
And then, of course, today our theme is that it's better to give than receive. So, have you noticed that in the process of giving feedback, do students make any changes in their own work? Do they come to any realizations?
Again, it's difficult to quantify or to get direct evidence of that. But I think so, based on the feedback that I get. I think the students I've spoken to uh, one to one say it's definitely affected their essay writing, uh, having to think about and look at other students' writings and think about what's good about them, what's bad about them, helps them understand how to write good essays.
Certainly, certainly. Well, now I'm going to turn it over to Owen.
Oh, I think we
Uh,
have a question.
oh,
I think we have a question in the chat.
oh, great. Yeah, awesome.
It's for
Love to.
Simon. Do you want me to read it out or do you want to go for it? Sorry, I don't want to take over
I've
the.
got it there. Yeah, what
Okay,
sort of
yeah.
scaffolding provided? Um, Interpretation of PFA. I mean, the scaffolding of the process. I mean, the scaffolding is the rubric and the details of the rubric that we've got there. So for each, like there are uh, five main criteria split to with three or four subpoints under most of them, each of them with a weighting. So they've got a sliding scale of 1 to 7 for each point, and then it adds those up to give the total. So the scaffolding is in the rubric, and then I have three dedicated lectures at the start of the term, towards the start of the term, where I go through that in detail. So they're additional to the core content lectures, just about essay writing. So and a lot of that is, as well as talking about the process of essay writing, which is nice to do, how to brainstorm and take notes and organize your notes and structure an argument, write an introduction. And I refer to the criteria as I'm doing that. And that's the scaffolding, and then so that's reinforced every time they use that to assess an essay. Yeah, so that's the main scaffolding.
And there's another comment, and I'll show you how that scaffolding looks and what the rubric looks like here in a moment. David states presumably Peerceptive supports the administration and distribution of the peer review works. That's absolutely correct. I'll show you that here in a second, when I will be giving a very brief demo so that folks can kind of see what that looks like.
Yeah, unless there are any more questions, I think Owen's going to go ahead and share his screen and dive into the platform, and then it'll become a little more clearer how Peerceptive supports the scaffolding and the distribution and the grading.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Bose, for sharing how you use Peerceptive. So hopefully everyone is now able to see a quick PowerPoint slide. So as Dr. Bose mentioned, they primarily use Peerceptive for peer review of written work. But Peerceptive really includes four main tools. So that's peer review and assessment of submitted work. We also include a team member evaluation tool. So if you do any group projects or group work, that team member evaluation tool allows students to evaluate the contributions of their group members to a group project. Essentially, what it does is it holds students accountable to be, equally contributing. It also measures those collaboration skills as well, so that students can get feedback on the group dynamics. It also includes a group formation tool that allows students to essentially fill out a survey created by that faculty member, and it will then group those students based on how they answered that survey. So it could group them by availability, it could group them by specialty, it could group them by topics of interest. It's really up to you how you want to set that up. Then the last thing to mention here is Peerceptiv also includes a live presentation review tool. So if you have students or groups give presentations, whether it's in person or, via video link, Peerceptiv has the ability to allow all of the students to be essentially evaluating that presentation. The benefit for the presenters that they get much more feedback from a much more diverse audience. And then, of course, the benefit for the students who are doing that evaluation is that they're much more keyed in and engaged in that presentation. Now, before I jump into the tool, I do just want to quickly mention that Peerceptiv was developed over the course of nearly 20 years of research at the University of Pittsburgh in the United States. And what this research does is it's really kind of underpins the tool, and it really kind of motivates everything that we do. But there's really three key components to pull out of that research. One is that student learning improves most by providing feedback to peers. So students will learn more giving feedback rather than simply receiving feedback, kind of the theme of today's topic. The other component is that if you have a multi-peer review process, meaning students are giving multiple peer reviews and not just sort of reviewing one student, that student writing improves most when they get multiple peer feedbacks from different sources. And so if they hear the same or similar feedback, they're significantly more likely to take action on that. Then the last thing to mention is that Peerceptiv includes a number of different ways to mark or score not only the quality of the submitted work, but also the quality of the peer review. In the United States, as you can imagine, grading is everything. I know that maybe doesn't quite apply as much to the UK and Ireland folks. But with Peerceptiv, assessment done by multiple peers using Peerceptiv and using the algorithms developed over the course of nearly 20 years of research at the University of Pittsburgh can be as valid and reliable as the score given by a single expert marker. All right, so I'm going to stop my share right there. And now I'm going to go ahead and jump into the tool, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Please do ask your questions in the chat. Kira can handle any questions platform related. Hannah can handle any questions, Jisc and licensing related, and Dr. Bose can handle any questions about how he implemented it in his own particular course. And then, of course, if there are any questions that are, should be bubbled up and you want me to answer directly, happy to do so. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into a Peerceptiv assignment, and I'm going to start by doing so as a student. I will also have to say, you'll have to forgive me, my internet is a little slow. I'm actually in a basement right now, so the internet does not penetrate the thick walls that I am in. So it may take just a moment to kind of set some of these things up. As I said, there's four main assignment types in Peerceptiv: group formation, team member evaluation, presentation evaluation, and then peer review. Peer review, of course, is what Dr. Bose uses. So this is that peer review assignment type. So this is the workflow that the students will take. We integrate with all major VLEs. So whether you have Blackboard, Canvas, Moodle, D2L Brightspace, we can integrate with your VLE. What that means is it will be single sign-on for the students. Essentially, they would click on the link to the assignment in the VLE. It then launches them to Peerceptiv. And then this is the process that they would follow. So the first part in a peer review process is some type of submission. Now, this can either be a submission from an individual or a group, and we see everything from written work like essays to PowerPoints, Excel sheets, infographics. We see a lot of submitted videos as well, and of course, you can actually link out to anywhere on the web, so you can even submit computer code to Peerceptiv. After the submission, the next step in the process is the peer review. So the peer review component lets the faculty decide how many peer reviews they want students to do. We typically see that being somewhere between 2 to 4, but it can really be anything from 1 to 10. Now that could be the end of the assignment right there. It could be submit, do your reviews, get your results. But as Dr. Bose mentioned, there's also the possibility for some additional steps. One of those steps is the feedback step. On the feedback step, this is where the students actually receive feedback on the reviews that they gave. And I'll show you this a little bit more in a second. And then, of course, we also have one additional step. This additional step is the reflect step. On the reflect step, what happens is that the students receive all of their results, but before any scores are finalized or any assignments are closed, they're tasked with answering a series of open-ended questions to get them to engage with those results and really think deeply about them moving forward. Now, I'm going to show you each of these steps, but I just wanted to give you that high-level overview. That being said, I am going to skip the submission step purely for the sake of time. You can basically, students are allowed to upload a file, they can input a link, or they can even type directly into Peerceptiv if you want them to use our own text box. So let's just pretend that I have already submitted my work. The next step in the process is this peer review component. And there's 3 ways that the reviews can be distributed to the question earlier. One is the faculty can manually assign who's going to review who. We basically never see that except unless there's 10 students or less in a module, because a lot of the time saving would be eaten up just by that logistics. So again, we rarely see it. You have the chance to do it, but we rarely see it. Another option is what's called review circles. With review circles, what happens is that the faculty sets up small groups of students, and then everyone within that group reviews each other. So this is great for multiple iterations of an assignment, for writing groups, for peer learning groups, or anything that might stick for the students for longer than just a simple assignment. Then, of course, the last way, the default way, is by far the most common way. And what happens there is when I click on this continue review button, what I just did is I just pulled the next available submission off the top of the digital stack that needs the most attention next. So in this scenario, what that means is that no one is assigned to review anyone in advance, and instead reviews are distributed on a pull system. So the big benefit here is that because no one is assigned to review anyone in advance, that means no one single student is going to be waiting on another student to submit. So if someone submits late or doesn't submit at all, that does not sort of gum up the works and impact the rest of the group. Instead, you can allow for late submissions and even have automatic penalties, which of course you can later waive for late submissions. But even those students who submit late are guaranteed to get just as many peer reviews as everybody else because of how the system prioritizes them. So if the deadline to submit is Monday and I don't submit until Thursday, likely everyone else has already gotten a round or 2 of peer review. I haven't gotten any yet because I submitted late, so my submission will jump straight to the top of the stack to be that next submission pulled by a student who's going to do a peer review. A student will never pull their own submission unless you specifically enable that. We do have a lot of folks who like it when students do a self-evaluation of their work, so you can enable that within the same workflow of the peer review as well. Otherwise, from the student's perspective, on the left-hand side is the work that I'm anonymously peer reviewing, and then on the right-hand side here is the rubric. The rubric is any combination of open-ended commenting prompts, such as this, as well as rating prompts, like this. It can be in any order and any number. You can have it be all comments, or it can be all ratings. It's really up to you how you want to set up your rubric. Everything I just highlighted here is completely customizable to you as well. So you can use our out-of-the-box rubrics, you can edit them, or you can create your own from scratch. You also have the ability to share rubrics with your colleagues. So if you have a colleague who is using Peerceptiv and you're interested in kind of emulating some of the things they do, they can actually share their rubrics with you. And that colleague could be in your institution or even further afield. The other nice thing about Peerceptiv is that anytime you create an assignment, a rubric prompt, that will then all automatically save within your personal templates at each of those levels. So if you teach a similar assignment in a different module, once you've created one rubric, you can copy that over. You can copy the template over to this other module, and then you can make any changes that you might want to make to that. Now, from the student's perspective, my task, and here you can see, here's where that scaffolding comes into play. Because you can make this prompt kind of whatever you'd like, you have the ability to have like bullet pointed questions. You could also add in like an italicized version of what great looks like. You can include a link to an example. You can include images. You can include links to videos. You even can include math equations if that's relevant. So what that means is that you really can guide those students to be leaving quality comments for one another by asking a series of questions or giving them examples of what good comments look like. Otherwise, as a student, my task here is to leave my comment. Then if I want, I can actually pin this comment directly into the document or into the submission, wherever it belongs. Now, if it's a video submission, the video actually plays natively right here in Peerceptiv, so you can timestamp a video. So we have a lot of students who might record a practice presentation or components of a presentation and upload those videos and then get timestamped comments and suggestions on that before they ultimately have to give the real presentation. So now that I've left my comment, I'll click next. And now I'm on to the next prompt. In this instance, it's a rating prompt. With these rating prompts, you can have as few as 2 selections, or you can have as many as 10 selections, or you can have anything in between. You also can completely customize what goes in these buttons. So mine say 4, 3, 2, 1 with a 1-sentence description of what that level looks like, but you might want yours to just say excellent, good, fair, poor, or maybe you want to include a phrase, or maybe up here you want to include a link of an example of 4-level work. Again, it's really up to you, and you have the ability to kind of scaffold and guide these students towards making the right analysis and selection. The other big benefit here is that because, as we said, students learn more giving feedback rather than simply receiving feedback, students will also better understand what your expectations of quality are when you have it spelled out, what this 4 should look like versus a 3 versus a 2 versus a 1, and so on. So I'm going to give this a 3. I'll click next. And now I'm on to the next prompt, whatever that might be. As I said, it could be another comment prompt or it could be a rating prompt. And then students would simply move through the process and complete each review. They do not have to do them all at once. They can complete a review, go to a sports practice, they can come back and do a second peer review, they can have dinner, do a third peer review, and so on and so forth. So as long as they're working within the deadlines, they have the ability to complete these at their own pace. But I'm going to take a step back. Let's just pretend that I've gone ahead and completed all my peer reviews. As I said, that could be the end of the assignment. It could be submit, review, get your results. But if you want, there is this additional step called the feedback step. Now, on the feedback step, my work is now on the left. The comments that I received are here on the right. If I click this button, it will actually scroll me in the document to where that comment is pinned. And then my task here is to rate how helpful I found this comment and to leave a comment back. So what this step really does is it accomplishes a number of things. One, it requires students to read every single comment that they got on their work and engage with it. As we know, that in itself is no small feat. So they will actively be engaging with each piece of content and comment that they got. Another thing that it does is it holds students accountable to be leaving quality comments in the first place, because the helpfulness of their comments is going to be scored and someone is going to reply to it. So that really is a great motivator for students to be taking the time to be leaving quality comments. And then the other thing that it does is it facilitates that back and forth between submitter and reviewer, and it facilitates that academic dialogue. So students will actually get better at giving and receiving feedback because of this component. All right, so I would simply work through the process by evaluating the helpfulness of each comment and responding to each. Otherwise, I'm going to take a step back. And just for the sake of time, I'm actually going to skip the reflect step as well. The reflect step is another step that you can do instead of the feedback or in addition to feedback, or again, you can do neither. The reflect step essentially shows the students all of their results, and it asks them a series of open-ended questions to get them to engage with those results and really think deeply about them. All right, so I've shown you the workflow for the students. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the student results. So if you'll just give me 1 minute, I'm navigating to a course that is complete, so you can see what those results look like. One quick thing to point out is that this results page is from a different assignment, so it's not going to look exactly kind of like what I showed you. All right, so this is what the students will receive at the end. And an important thing to note here is that what is actually on this page is completely configurable to you. Each of these components, each of these light gray squares can be hidden from the students. So if grading is not a component of the assignment, you can simply hide the grades or have there be no grade. If you don't have students giving comments to each other, you can hide the comments. If you don't want students to see their average rating scores, you can simply hide that as well. Perhaps you're only interested in the act of giving the peer review and you're not actually interested in the scores. Again, it's completely up to you what you want to hide and what the students see and how you actually measure success in these assignments. Now, on the right-hand side of this page is a repository of all of the comments that the students received on their submission that they can filter based on the prompt. We've already guaranteed that they've engaged with every single one of these comments in the feedback step or the reflect step, but here's where they can revisit them later on in the module. This middle part shows how they performed on average according to the ratings. So they can see areas where they did really well, as well as areas where there's room for improvement. And if they click this More button, they can actually see where they fell on the rubric and what they need to do in order to level up that particular skill or ability. And then one important thing to note is that when you set up your rubrics or when your instructional design team sets up rubrics or whoever that might be, what you can do is you can actually tag supplemental learning materials to each rating prompt and then set a threshold where any student who scores below that threshold actually receives that supplemental learning material. So in this instance, I told the system when I set up my rubric that any student who gets a 2 or below on this narrative purpose prompt should automatically be shown this help with narrative purpose resource, which when I click on it, in this instance, it takes me to a blog on narrative writing. But this could be a link back into your VLE. This could be a link to a tutoring service, an on-campus writing center. It could be a link to a YouTube video, a file you've uploaded, a sample chapter. We've even had some instructors record videos of themselves saying, it looks like you struggled with product market fit. Here are the 5 most important things to think about when it comes to product market fit, or something along those lines. So really what this is allowing you to do is it's allowing you to upload help resources that you might otherwise just end up emailing to students after the fact anyways when they ask for help. So this does it automatically without the students having to ask. So the great thing about that is that oftentimes we know students won't ask for help even if they need it. Well, this automatically provides it to them, and it's individualized based on the areas where there's room for improvement. Of course, if they struggle in multiple areas, they'll get multiple help resources. And even if they do great on the assignment, they will still get multiple help resources. Or they'll still get any help resources tied specifically to any skills where they did not perform as well. Okay, the last thing to mention here is the grades or the marking. And I'm going to be honest, I'm going to start broad and kind of narrow in because in the United States, the grade is everything. But I know that that's not always the case, and that's often not the case in the UK. So I'm going to walk you through all of the different grade options, even though some of them may or may not be relevant to the way you want to run your course. So at its most basic level, Peerceptiv can be an ungraded activity. There does not have to be a grade or a mark generated for Peerceptiv. It can simply be an exercise for students to complete. If you did want there to be some sort of scoring component, you also can have it be a participation-based score, where as long as they take the time to complete everything within Peerceptiv, they get however many points or whatever mark it might be worth. So again, it could be no score, it could be participation, it could also be pass-fail. With pass-fail, you set minimum thresholds of quality for each of these components, and as long as the student meets those minimum thresholds, they'll pass and get, whatever mark or however many points it might be worth. And then the last thing to mention, and this is actually what I'm showing you right now, is the most popular way it's done in the United States. Again, that doesn't mean it's the best way. That doesn't mean it's the appropriate way for you, but this is the way it's often done in the United States. So with this, what it is it's an overall score that takes into account any combination of these 4 components, each of which can be given more or less weight than the others, and each of which can actually be turned off. So these 4 components that could feed into this score are the submission score. So that's the quality of the work that you submitted to be reviewed. I should also mention that all of this is a percentage out of 100. So submission is the quality of the work that you or your group submitted to be peer reviewed. Task is just, did you complete everything in Peerceptiv? Helpfulness is actually the quality of the comments that you provided if the feedback step is turned on. Then accuracy is a measurement of how accurate you were as a peer reviewer. And this is kind of the secret sauce behind Peerceptiv, and this is really what takes a little bit more explaining. And again, whether you want a grade or a mark to be generated or not, this algorithm is always running in the background. So what accuracy does is it's a measurement of how the ratings you gave on a specific submission compared to how others rated that same submission. So let's say that myself, Kira, and Simon all reviewed Hannah. The system would compare how Simon rated Hannah versus how Kira rated Hannah versus how I rated Hannah. What the system will do then is it will look at how we all rated Hannah and do a comparison. Now, when Kira goes to do a second peer review, let's say of Jeff, the system will make sure that Simon and I don't also review Jeff. Instead, Kira will be paired up to review against 2 other students or however many other students. Of course, it's all double blind and anonymous, so no one really knows this. They don't know who they're reviewing with or against or anything like that. But essentially what the point I'm trying to get is that the system makes sure that you are reviewing documents against a number of different students within the class so that there's lots of points for comparison. If you do 3 peer reviews, you'll be compared to at least 6 other students within that course. Then what the system does is, in particular, it looks at how you deviated from the mean and how you put items in a particular rank order to generate an accuracy score for your reviewing. Now, the vast majority of students will get a very good score for this. It's on a very generous curve. But what this accuracy score does is a few things. One, it motivates students and holds them accountable to be taking their time to be an accurate reviewer. The other thing that it does is it finds those students who are deviating wildly. Perhaps they're being way too generous or way too harsh, and it decreases their accuracy score. And then it also finds any students with any suspicious rating patterns, such as just giving 5s across the board. So not only can that decrease their own score, but the other thing that it does, and again, this is the secret sauce here, is that depending on your accuracy, you will have more or less weight for the reviews that you gave. So in that same scenario, if the system determines that Simon is a very accurate peer reviewer, Kira is decently accurate, and unfortunately, I'm not accurate at all because I just gave everyone 5s across the board at 11:59 p.m. Not only will that harm my own score, but that also means that Kira and Simon are going to have a much greater impact on Hannah's submission score and on Hannah's average rating scores than I will, because the system is actually calibrating for accuracy and controlling for the fact that different students are stronger peer reviewers than others. And so that is how Peerceptiv is able to generate research-proven, valid, and reliable scores, because we do that accuracy adjustment on all submissions and on all work. And again, developed over the course of nearly 20 years of research at the University of Pittsburgh. Now, everything that I've described up until this point has required 0 instructor intervention other than actually setting up the assignment itself. But if the faculty does want to get involved in the scoring, there's 2 ways that they can do it. One is called benchmarking. And with benchmarking, what we do is we just send you 10 submissions at random, and you simply give them an overall score. That overall score then creates the benchmarks, or the curve, against which the rest of the class is calibrated. So that allows you to be involved in the scoring, but kind of in a light way. Another way that faculty can be involved in the scoring is they can actually provide reviews of submissions as well. And when a faculty member provides a review of a submission, we adjust everyone's accuracy to how closely they align to that faculty member. So let's say that an instructor also reviewed Hannah, and Kira and the instructor gave very similar ratings on Hannah. That means that's going to boost Kira's accuracy score. Now, when Kira goes and does a peer review of Ted, even if the instructor doesn't also review Ted, we already know that Kira is an accurate peer reviewer. So Kira now becomes that pillar of accuracy against which the rest of the people who evaluated Ted are then measured and adjusted. So what that means is that the faculty has the ability to review maybe 10 or 15% of all submissions, but actually directly or indirectly touch the score of all of them. All right, so that is everything on the student side of things. I'm going to stop acting as a student, and I'm going to quickly show you the faculty side of things from the results page. So from this progress tab, faculty can click on any individual student. They can act as them, they can leave a review, they can override their score, they can see their score, their submission, and then they can see all the reviews that were given and all the reviews that were received, as well as the back and forth between submitter and reviewer. So nothing happens in the system that they cannot personally see. So although it's double blind for the students, The faculty members, the instructors, the TAs, the administrators, whoever it might be, they have full control to be able to see everything. Now, from this results page, you can actually download all of those results. This middle card shows how your class performed on average according to the ratings. So you can see areas where your course has performed very well, as well as areas where there's common misunderstandings that you might want to address in a future class period, or when you're redesigning your course. Scrolling down a little bit further, you can actually toggle to see your highest and lowest performing students in any one particular area. What that means is that you can really provide some individualized instruction based on where students are struggling. And then the last thing to mention, and this is completely optional, some folks use this, some folks don't. It's really up to you. But if you're tasked with tracking any university program, department, research, or accreditation learning standards, you can actually tag all of your rating prompts with any learning standards that you want to track. And we generate an overall mastery score for that. So you can see this at the course level. You can see this for individual students. And then this can actually feed up into an administrator dashboard where you can track how an entire program is performing towards those standards, or you can track student progress over time. So we actually, if anyone's familiar with AACSB standards, learning standards for business school, we actually have a number of folks who use Peerceptiv to track towards those AACSB standards. All right, so that is everything I had to show you on the peer review assignment type. Kira, are there any questions I should address right at this moment about peer review? Otherwise, I'm going to move on and I'm going to very quickly show you that team member evaluation assignment type, just because it's quite different. And then we'll have plenty of time for any additional questions at the end.
Yes, we actually did just get a question in the chat. Am I right in thinking that the peer review process cannot finalize in some form of direct instructor oversight? For example, the students submit a document, provide feedback to each other, and then an instructor provides some form of further or summative grading feedback, either on the initial work or on the reviews themselves.
Great question. The answer is kind of in the middle a little bit. So the faculty members do have the ability to provide scores and feedback on the reviews themselves. So if that's really the component that you're interested in, you can provide feedback to those students. If you're familiar with, like, it's kind of like a quick grader type carousel that moves you through all of those reviews. In terms of the other question, the instructor does have the ability to review all submissions, and they can indicate, or all submissions or some of the submissions, but they can indicate whether they're an instructor or they can just be anonymous and not the instructor. So yes, the faculty member does have the ability to be involved in the assessment, in the further of the assessment process, including, assessing the reviews and assessing the submitted work. Now, if the question is there any, does Peerceptiv facilitate students taking all the feedback, rewriting it, and then submitting it again through Peerceptiv for the final mark or score from the faculty member? The answer to that is no. The way folks do that is kind of how Dr. Bose does that, where they have students do kind of like a practice or initial or a first draft or a submission. They take back all of the comments, they rewrite it on their own, and then they submit it through whatever channel happens to be that final essay submission. All right, so I'm going to very quickly show you the team member evaluation assignment type. So the assignment type we just discussed is for submitted work, whether it's an individual submission or a group submission. Now, if you do group projects, there's also the ability to evaluate the contributions of group members as a student. So a bit different. You're not evaluating work, you're evaluating contributions, again, to hold everyone accountable. So again, they would access it very similarly. Click on the link in the VLE, it launches them to Peerceptiv. Then here they have the ability to do a number of different types of evaluations. They can evaluate how the group performed as a whole. They can evaluate each individual group member. As part of that, they can do a self-evaluation. And if someone has been designated to be a group leader, they can also evaluate that group leader on a specific rubric as well. And again, I'm going a little bit quickly just simply for the sake of time. But what I want to show you is what it's like to evaluate one of your group members. Again, everything is anonymous here. So I'm evaluating Jerlene. I'm just going to skip one over and let me make my screen slightly smaller just so it fits. So I'm evaluating Jerlene. On the right-hand side is the rubric. Again, any combination of comments and ratings. On the left-hand side is actually a list of all of the students in my group and what I've currently evaluated them. I went through and I already evaluated everybody just for the sake of this exercise. Now, what you'll notice is that when I give Jerlene a score, Jerlene moves up and down on this list view based on that score that I'm providing. So what this dynamic list view does is it gets students to be thinking, relatively speaking, about the contributions of their group members. So what we hear consistently is that there's a lot less just everyone gives each other fives, and there's a lot more individualization because students will be thinking, relatively speaking, about the contributions of their group members. Now, of course, there's nothing stopping me from giving multiple people the same score. If multiple people deserve a 5, multiple people can get a 5, but we do see a lot more individualization. So the students would simply work through the assignment, giving these scores to each individual as they move along. The one thing to point out is that no one can actually see this list view besides the person who's providing the review, as well as any faculty, administrator, instructor, TA, whoever that might be. A student would never see that I gave Naomi a 5 and I gave Jerlene a 4 for overall contribution. Instead, they only receive their averages at the end. And then, of course, you can also provide comments for that specific individual. I'm going to stop acting as the student, and I'm going to very quickly show you what the results page for these team member evaluation assignment types look like. Give me one quick second. And I am just moving to a student who is ready for that. So this is what it looks like from the student view. So students always get their score expressed as percentage. Now, how that percentage is created is there's 3 ways. One, it could be completion. Just did you take the time to evaluate everyone within your group? If so, everyone gets the feedback, everyone gets the scores, everyone gets the comments, but it's really just an exercise in participation. Or it can be how you were actually evaluated by your group members, or it can be a combination of the two. So maybe half of your score is how you were evaluated by your group members. The other half is just, did you take the time to complete all of the evaluations? And again, this feeds into this overall score that can be passed back into your VLE. You also have the ability to change this score throughout the term. So if you have multiple team member evaluations throughout the term, maybe the first couple you want it just to be an exercise in participation, and maybe the last couple you want it to be how they were actually evaluated by their group members. Scrolling down a little further, this web diagram just gives you a little more granularity. So each of these components on the web is a specific rating prompt within my rubric. So I can see how my peers scored me on average versus what the class average is. And if I did a self-evaluation, I can actually have another overlay that would show me how I evaluated myself, whether I was being unduly generous or unduly harsh. I did not complete a self-evaluation for this activity, but there is the ability to do so. Scrolling down further, again, granularity. So each of these subheadings is a prompt within the rubric, so I can see the different scores and how they compared. And then at the bottom, of course, I can see all of the review comments as well. So I can see what the anonymous comments on my work were. All right, so we've got 10 minutes left. I think that's probably a good place to stop. As we've discussed, we shared the peer review assignment type for submitted work. I've now shown you the team member evaluation assignment type for any group projects. We have a group formation tool, which is exactly how it sounds. Students have the ability to answer, surveys to form groups. And then we have a presentation evaluation tool, which is really basically exactly like the peer review tool, except it's live. So rather than reviews being distributed, you're actually selecting the person who is presenting. But with that, I want to go ahead and stop there for any questions. Kira, any questions in the chat that I should address or any finer points to add?
I believe I have answered the questions that are in the chat. If there are additional questions, please raise your hands and we can bring them out to the group. Do you have additional questions?
One thing I will mention is that some instructors will use all 4 of our assignment types. Some will just use one. and anything in between. There's no cost difference for the number of assignments you use or assignments you run or anything like that. So if you don't do any group projects, then you can basically ignore the last 10 minutes of this presentation. If you do group projects and you want people to peer review submissions, great. There's multiple tools that you can use to do that as well.
Perhaps it would be good if you could speak to self-assessment for a moment. We had a couple questions in the chat. Can I use this to have students review peer work and not provide comments on peer work, but provide comments on their own work? What they see might help them improve their own work. This plays in the idea that students learn more from reviewing because they reflect back on their own work. Making this reflection explicit as a self-feedback amplifies this process. So maybe you could speak to how self-assessment works in Peerceptiv and the options we have.
So absolutely. So any assignment in in the team member evaluation or the peer review assignment type, you can do a self-assessment. And it's as easy for the faculty as just ticking one button in the settings that will then require them to also assess their own work. So a good way of it. So essentially, yes, exactly what you're describing can happen. Students can be exposed to each other's work, but they can review only their own if you would like. With the team member evaluation assignment type, and of course, anytime they're reviewing themselves, that only counts towards like a completion or a task score. They can't give themselves all fives across the board and think that that's going to actually make a difference in their overall scores. It's only for completion. For the team member evaluation component, it's exactly the same. So you can with team member evaluation, you can do a true 360 review because you can evaluate your own contributions to the group project. And again, it's exactly everything is within the workflow of each other. So other tools might say, oh, we've got a peer review tool and a self-evaluation tool and split them out as different. In Peerceptiv, they're one and the same. It's just a matter of which settings you turn on or turn off.
Yes, they would comment on their own work and not score or grade it. Yes, that's essentially how it works. The rubric that you would create to be a peer review rubric could also be used for a self-assessment rubric, as Owen was saying. So students, go ahead, Owen.
And I was just going to say, with all of these, it's completely up to you what that rubric looks like. If you only want it to be comments and no ratings, that's perfectly fine. You would not be the only people to do it that way. Or we have some really interesting use cases where faculty will actually upload submissions and then they'll have students rate the submissions and not provide comments, but the score will really be how closely their assessment of that work aligns with the faculty's assessment of that work. So again, that's a situation where there's no commenting and only rating. So you can set up the rubric to be kind of whatever you would like. I would also very quickly add that in terms of onboarding and ongoing support, that's all included within Peerceptiv at no additional cost. So we will quite literally get on a Zoom meeting with each individual instructor or faculty and help them set up their assignments to make them exactly what they want. For better or for worse, Peerceptiv is very customizable. So we have a lot of people who have a lot of different edge cases that want something very, very specific, and we can often accommodate those because again, we will work directly with you within the tool.
I have another comment. Reading seems weaker as writing comments makes thinking deeper and writing is learning. This is definitely true. The reading prompts do prompt students to reflect. And if you look in that research I sent from Dr. Shun, some of that is on how scaffolding in the rating prompt can prompt students to think about, a 3 looks like this, a 5 looks like this, a 1 looks like this. So rating comments can definitely prompt some deep thinking. In our system, the rating prompts generate the score or the final mark. So that's primarily what they're used for.
And it's also used to give students a quantitative view on areas where there's room for improvement. So again, you can have all comments or you can have all ratings or you can have any combination. It's really up to you and what's going to be relevant to your particular assignment type.
Any other questions?
I'll ask a quick one. About pricing, 'cause you mentioned that, and that value for money matters these days in the current climate. I know when we've used it, we buy seats, one per student. Um, and we've just been using the peer assessment faculty, but the other ones all sound very useful. If we used all four of those, is it still one seat? We still get the
Exactly.
same.
Yep, it's an all-inclusive tool. So regardless of which tools you use or how many, it's all inclusive.
That will definitely help with selling it to my head of school.
Perfect. And then the other thing to mention is that in terms of the different licensing options, at the highest level, you could get an unlimited subscription for your entire university, just based on your FTE. Below that, it could be for a specific, an unlimited subscription for a specific department, program, faculty, whatever that might be. And then below that, it can be just a simple seat purchase. So if you're only interested in using this in one module and you have 40 total students and you're the only one in the entire university who wants to use Peerceptiv, you absolutely can still use Peerceptiv and it'll be priced just specifically for your particular use case. For any types of pricing questions, a good place to start is always Hannah. Hannah can provide a lot of that information and licensing, and then of course we can all work together. Peerceptiv does also include pilot pricing options as well, so that you have the ability to try out Peerceptiv for a year before making any sort of major financial commitment.
And with that, we are very close to the end of time. So, Hannah, did you have any other comments you wanted to make about licensing, pricing?
No, it's wonderful. Owen just did my job for me. This is great. So Owen just said everything. What I will say is that we have a substantial discount through the Jisc agreement. It's definitely worth taking a look at our web pages so you can see the discount there. It's visible on the web pages. Also, Owen alluded there to the pilot pricing. The pilot pricing is an even greater discount and incredibly competitive, especially as you increase on student numbers. It becomes very, very cheap in comparison to any other tools we offer. Yeah, so as my job was done for me, and it's 2 minutes too, I probably shouldn't say any more questions and then we go.
Thank you so much for attending, Dr. Simon. We appreciate all your useful insights on actually using the tool in the classroom. Very helpful. Thank you, Hannah, for coming and talking to licensing. We appreciate you as well. And Owen, thank you for your time.
Thanks,
With that,
everybody,
I think we're wrapped up.
and we will get the recording out to everybody in due course.
Of course, and I've put my email in the chat if you want to discuss anything licensing and pricing related with me. If you don't have access to the Chess website, that's fine. I can send you through the web pages as a PDF via email. Just let me know.
And
And
I am putting
I will quickly put my email in as well for any questions related to the platform. Happy to dive deeper for anyone who would like to dive deeper.
great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.